Belize. Between tropical rainforests and large coral reefs, ancient Maya ruins and branched cave systems, Belize is a feast for the senses. Follow us on our journey as we experience the natural orchestra of this forest wonderland. Our road trip through Belize started by picking up our rental car at the airport. Before long, we found ourselves on the northern highway. Once we had taken the turn off to a bumpy gravel road, we drove past fields of sugarcane as the clouds started to close in. To our surprise, it soon began bucketing down, which somewhat contradicted our idea of a dry season. Because Belize is rather small, we quickly reached the Shipstern Conservation Area, a nature reserve in the northeastern corner of the country. For many animals such as the jaguar, this park is a much-needed refuge, as deforestation is increasingly threatening their survival. The chances of actually seeing one are extremely slim though. Nonetheless, we kept our eyes open as we strolled through the forest, taking in the many shades of green. After a while, we came upon a lookout tower that promised us a sweeping view. With a height of 23 meters, the top platform rose significantly above the canopy. Of course, we had hoped to spot some birds, but around midday, they tend to seek shelter in the shade. Following the road a little further, we eventually arrived in the fishing village of Sarteneja. The primary industry in this part of the country is shipbuilding and fishing. At the same time, the nascent tourism industry is slowly developing, which is no surprise when looking at such brightly colored water. Life moves at a very slow pace here, which makes Sarteneja a great destination for all those seeking peace and quiet. Eventually, we left the village behind and headed inland. On our way, we came upon a lagoon that could only be crossed on a hand-cranked ferry.
It's a proper workout, eh? Yeah.
This relic of the past, which is solely propelled by human muscle power, is one of two ferries in the area that is to be replaced by a bridge. While the ferry's imminent decommissioning is certainly a loss for adventure-loving travelers, the locals are already rejoicing. Taking a narrow forest road, we continued towards an archaeological site. To our delight, we were the only visitors, far and wide. Reading the name of the inland trail, we prudently decided to follow the coastline. Soon after, several Maya ruins appeared ahead of us. Dating back approximately 2,500 years, the site that is today known as Cerros used to be an eastern lowland Maya village. Roughly 1,100 people called this settlement home, before it was abandoned around 400 AD. Most of the site still remains unexcavated, however, several structures have been restored or rebuilt. The carved masks on the front of the temple were particularly noteworthy. Their flawless appearance, despite hundreds of years of wind and weather, is due to the fact that the limestone originals have been covered with fiberglass replicas. This is done to protect them from further erosion and the overzealous caressing of visitors. The same technique has also been used at other Maya sites. One of these is Lamanai, a major city in times long gone. For several reasons, this former settlement is remarkable. To begin with, Lamanai, which translates to submerged crocodile, is the original Maya name of the city. As far as we know, this site was inhabited for a staggering 3 millennia. Unlike many other Mayan kingdoms, Lamanai did not implode around 1000 AD, but remained a lively town into the 18th century. Several of the former structures have been restored, the most impressive of which is the High Temple. Standing 33 meters high, this stepped pyramid is believed to have been the tallest building in Mesoamerica in the 1st century BC. The top of the temple sits above the jungle canopy, which made it useful as a lookout and as a celestial observatory. Even though the High Temple may not be climbed, the same does not apply to the Jaguar Temple. Whereas Lamanai has been devoid of human inhabitants for some time, troops of Yucatan black howler monkeys can often be seen in the trees. Further down, we also spotted a band of white-nosed coatis. While male coatis tend to be solitary, females are highly gregarious, often forming large groups of 20 to 30 animals. Unlike many other members of the raccoon family, coatis are active during the day, which makes it much easier to observe them. Being omnivores, they forage for anything, ranging from fruits to insects and invertebrates. When on the hunt for beetles, ants or spiders, they often push away the leaf litter with their long pointed snouts. Their excellent sense of smell allows them to sniff out prey hiding underneath rocks or in crevices. Pastoral trek brought us all the way to our accommodation for the next couple of nights. The recently opened Crystal Creek Lodge is run by a young Belizean couple. So far, there's only one cabin on the property, which meant that we had the entire place to ourselves. Needless to say, we immensely enjoyed this tranquil solitude. In the early morning, the air was abuzz with the singing of birds. It is hard to imagine a more peaceful setting to have breakfast. Sitting directly along the Rio Bravo, the property borders a large conservation area. Depending on the season and the amount of rainfall, The stream changes its color between dark green and an alluring turquoise. Even during yet another heavy downpour, the river retained its calming power. One of the best options to explore this waterway is with a kayak. Quietly paddling below the branches, I marveled at the primeval jungle. As the afternoon turned to evening, the melodious singing of the birds was increasingly drowned by the droning chorus of the cicadas. To explore this riverine wilderness a little more, we went on a boat outing with Philip, the owner of the lodge. The further we headed upstream, the more the vegetation started to close in. Surrounded by this ocean of green, I remembered a quote from Joseph Conrad, author of Heart of Darkness. Going up that river was like traveling back to the earliest beginnings of the world, when vegetation rioted on the earth and the big trees were kings. An empty stream, a great silence, an impenetrable forest. Sometime later, we arrived at a tributary that mesmerized us with its translucence. The untainted water originates from a hidden spring deep in the forest. Eager to catch a glimpse of this aquatic spectacle from below the surface, we put on fins and hopped in. One thing we immediately noticed was the surprisingly strong current. Because of the water's swift flow, innumerable sand particles were swept up, which danced beautifully in the sunlight. In the meantime, we were quickly surrounded by small fish, which were investigating our presence in their realm. On the road, we drove further west into the wildlife-rich Rio Bravo Conservation Area. Covering roughly 4% of Belize's landmass, this is the largest nature reserve in the country. As such, it protects a wealth of flora and fauna. Among the animals we spotted was the ocellated turkey. The species' males are known for an orange, crown-like appendage on their heads, which tends to enlarge during the breeding season. Much smaller than the turkey is the rufous-tailed hummingbird, one of at least 26 hummingbird species in Belize. Saying farewell to the northwest, we drove southwards towards Belize City. On our way, we stopped at Altun Ha, a former Mayan city that was abandoned around the year 1000. Several of the site's pyramid structures have been rebuilt, creating a vivid image of what the settlement may have looked like. long after, we weaved our way through Belize City, the former capital of the country. From here, we boarded a ferry that would bring us to Caye Cailker, one of the many limestone coral islands off the coast. Due to its proximity to the Belize Barrier Reef, the island has become a popular tourist destination. Instead of staying on the busy southern part of the island, we took a small boat to the more quiet northern half. Once back ashore, we checked into our accommodation for the next 3 nights, eager to go snorkeling the next day. Little did we know that things would turn out much differently. The following morning, we awoke to moody skies and strong winds. With the ocean being properly choppy, our aspirations to go snorkeling quickly evaporated. To top it all off, it soon started to rain cats and dogs. For the next hour, a tropical rainstorm at its finest destroyed our remaining hopes of going out on the water. Much to our consternation, the weather remained the same for the following 2 days. In the few moments the rain eased up, we gloomily wandered around the water-drenched streets of the village. On the day of our departure from Caye Cailker, it was still windy, but at least the sky had cleared. This allowed us to board a small airplane for a scenic flight. In no time, we left the island behind and looked down on the second largest coral reef system in the world. With a length of more than 300 kilometers, the Belize Barrier Reef is part of the 900-kilometer long Mesoamerican Barrier Reef System that stretches from Mexico to Honduras. Large parts of the reef have been protected to preserve the stunning underwater world. Nonetheless, the reef faces many threats, such as oceanic pollution, over-tourism, rising ocean temperatures, and the odd hurricane. Undoubtedly, the most well-known part of the reef is the Great Blue Hole. This staggering natural phenomenon is a giant marine sinkhole, 124 meters deep and 318 meters wide. On the mainland, we passed through the narrow streets of Belize City once more, until heading south on the newly built coastal highway. The next part of our road trip brought us to the south of the country, with our first destination being Mayflower Bokawina National Park. To get there, we took a bumpy gravel road through the dense forest. At Mayflower Bokawina, hiking enthusiasts will find many trails to their liking. The leisurely bird loop trail is ideal for all those who want to take in the varied flora. Those taking their time will soon notice the fascinating diversity of plants and fungi.
The wind is really playing tricks on us today because there's a lot of rustling up in the canopy, and usually that is a good indication for animals, for example for howler monkeys or spider monkeys, but today we haven't spotted any yet. And it might actually just be the wind, but we'll make sure to keep our eyes and ears open and maybe we'll spot a couple.
While we did not spot any monkeys, we came upon a great kiskadee, as well as a well-camouflaged rainforest toad. Those keen for a bit more of a challenge can hike to Antelope Falls. The steep trail leads to a pretty waterfall surrounded by dense foliage. At the top of the main fall, a large pool invites sweaty hikers to cool off. Apparently, it is also a great place to contemplate. Visitors driving a sturdy 4x4 can follow a slightly overgrown road deeper into the jungle. With the right mindset, the bumpy ride is a lot of fun. At the end of the trail, an easy walk leads to the lower Bokawina Falls. Here, the gushing water scenically flows down a smooth rock face. Because of its remote location, there is a good chance that you get to enjoy the falls all by yourself. A little further south, the Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Sanctuary equally entices visitors with forest trails and waterfalls. The reserve is known as a prime habitat for jaguars, and much effort has been put into their preservation. As far back as the 1980s, these big cats were studied in the area. A vivid reminder of these early conservation efforts is the wreck of a single-engine aircraft. The plane was used by Dr. Alan Rabinowitz to monitor jaguars that carried a radio collar. Luckily, all 3 passengers survived the crash. To gain a panorama view of the nature reserve, a hike up Ben's Bluff is well worth the effort. In the distance, Victoria Peak, the second highest summit of Belize, distinctly rises above the trees. On a narrow forest track close to the village of Red Bank, we arrived at a well-known feeding place for colorful birds. All we needed to do was to follow our local guide Raul to find the perfect lookout. And then we listened. A flash of color in the distance indicated our first success, a pair of Scarlet Macaws. Soon the numbers started to grow, until 40 or more of these striking birds populated the treetops. In Belize, the village of Red Bank is the prime location to see Scarlet Macaws. It is estimated that less than 300 of these birds exist in the country. In the past, they were mercilessly hunted for their feathers, as well as for the pet trade. Because it is a very slow-growing species, their numbers are only now starting to bounce back. From December to March, Scarlet Macaws leave their highland homes for lower elevations to feed on ripe fruits. Close to Red Bank, they find them in abundance, resulting in a feeding spree. While their colorful plumage is a wonder to look at, their singing talent leaves much to be desired. Often described as raucous honks, these birds remain in constant communication. The best time to see this congregation is in March. Occasionally, hundreds of these magnificent creatures dye the treetops in an abundance of colors. Having had our fair share of the jungle, we headed back towards the coast. Close to the village of Placencia, we checked into the oceanside hideaway Turtle Inn. Our beachfront cottage was directly facing the sea, resulting in a wonderful view. Meanwhile, the very spacious living room, as well as the outdoor terrace, were perfectly suited to process all the previous excitement.
One of the most unusual things about our room is the presence of a shell phone, and this can be used to communicate with the front desk, which is exactly what I'm about to do right now, as we have run out of cookies.
Front desk, good afternoon. This is Mavina speaking. How can I help?
Hi, this is Lucas speaking. Could I please request a refill of our cookie jar?
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Et voila. Now to the cookies. Very nice. I finished them all alone. Yeah.
All right, no problem. Do you need more? Let us know.
Oh, we will.
Yeah. No.
But hopefully not. Diabetes is waiting otherwise.
All right. There you go.
Thank you so
You're welcome.
much.
Okay.
In the evening, we went on a stroll around the property, soaking in the calming seaside atmosphere. The following morning, we had hoped to make up for our missed snorkeling excursion with a trip to the reef. Alas, the weather thwarted our plans a second time. Instead of the open ocean, we stayed close to the coast and headed for Monkey River Town. The small settlement is purely Creole, counting less than 200 inhabitants. However, it is less the charm of the village and more the wildlife along the Monkey River that draws visitors. To spot some of these animals, we slowly cruised upstream. Knowing exactly where to look, our guide quickly spotted some well-camouflaged beds. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree.
Very nice. I finished them all alone. Yeah.
Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tree. Equally hard to see was this young crocodile hiding on a fallen tr Somewhat easier to discover were the different kinds of birds, such as this yellow-backed oriole and scarlet-rumped tanager. Once they had flown away, a grey catbird descended on the same branch of fruits. Watching the comings and goings from above, this black-headed trogon looked on majestically. Meanwhile, several green iguanas, which are locally known as bamboo chicken, were resting on lofty branches. After some time, we went ashore. It didn't take long until we stumbled upon a couple of spiders. The biggest of these was a fully grown tarantula.
Spider?
Oh, really?
When it bites you, it's like cancer.
Stays in.
Yeah, it stays in. Yeah. That's a big one, though, huh?
Yeah,
This is cotton. This is the cotton. This is another cedar. This is the cyber. This is the cotton.
Similar.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So-
He put out the spike too, but he going to grow huge.
Yeah.
He's going to grow huge. He's going to grow big, huge, huge, huge. They call them giants of the jungle, right?
True to the river's name, we also discovered some howler monkeys. Most fascinating, however, was the army of leafcutter ants busying themselves on the forest floor. These leaf-chewing insects are incredibly intriguing for a number of reasons. To start off, they form one of the most complex societies in the animal kingdom. Scientists have discovered that leafcutter ants practice division of labor. Differently sized individuals perform separate tasks, ranging from growing the brood to defending the nest, clearing the trails, and cutting leaves. The larger ants are capable of carrying up to 20 times their own body weight. Building on that strength, a never-ending stream of freshly cut leaves is transported to the nest, which can reach epic proportions. Completely bewildering, however, is the fact that the ants do not feed on the leaves, but instead use them to cultivate fungi. Much like human farmers, leafcutter ants take care of a fungal garden in a symbiosis that is termed ant-fungus mutualism. Carrying on with our road trip, we headed to the deep south of the country. Not far from the town of Punta Gorda, we drove up to our accommodation for the next 3 nights. Copal Tree Lodge is a luxurious eco-lodge in the rainforest of southern Belize. The entire property is surrounded by jungle, immersing guests in the sounds, sights and smells of nature. Having enjoyed a welcome drink, we walked over to our private cabin. Our king jungle suite was both spacious and comfortable. At the same time, it was deeply embedded in nature. Each window looked out onto the intense green of the forest. This even applied to the bathroom, turning this into a veritable rainforest shower. The screened-in balcony immediately beckoned us to soak in the atmosphere. Before we knew it, the sun started to set and afternoon turned to evening. This is the alarm clock of the jungle, the call of the howler monkey. A group of these vociferous animals sits directly in the trees above our cabin, and apparently they're in a battle of howls with another group a bit further away. But frankly, at 4:30 in the morning, this deafening forest concert is more than a little demonic. Unlike spider monkeys, which are known to move quickly from one tree to another, howler monkeys are much more laid back. Therefore, it was no surprise to find this boisterous group still lounging around the next morning. Of all howler monkey subspecies, the Yucatan black howler monkey is the largest. Males reach a weight of 11 kilograms on average, while females are slightly smaller. The majority of a howler monkey's day is spent resting. However, they also need to continuously feed, as their main diet consists of leaves, which have a low nutritional value. Several adaptations, such as molars with high shearing crests, enable them to focus on such a folivorous diet. Of course, if in season, they also gladly snack on fruits. As such, they are important seed dispersers for many trees. To get to the tastiest food, they often use their prehensile tail, which allows them to dangle head first from a branch. Once they have reached sexual maturity at age 4, females are ready to mate with a dominant male. At first, the newborn stays very close to its mother. But as soon as it grows older, it begins to venture out, slowly honing its climbing skills. Whereas they are laid back most of the time, howler monkeys are also capable climbers. In general, these monkeys live in groups of 6 to 15 animals. Jointly, they defend their preferred feeding sites. However, instead of engaging in physical violence, they make use of thundering vocalizations. Their consistent, deep, guttural growl is regarded as the loudest noise of any land animal. In some instances, their howls travel as far as 5 kilometers. Apparently, the two groups from earlier that morning still hadn't finished their conversation, which resulted in us enjoying their ear-shattering concert a second time before breakfast. Later that day, we went on a tour to learn more about the local production of sugarcane. Contrary to many other plants, sugarcane is not native to Belize, but was introduced by the British. Originally, it was cultivated to fulfill the world's hunger for sugar. However, the varieties grown today have different characteristics and are much better suited to the production of rum.
Okay.
Just up here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Wow, that is so sharp. Incredible.
Our subsequent tasting confirmed that the raw cane is quite delicious. From the quiet fields, we then went on to the buzzing distillery, where Copal Tree produces their very own rum. As soon as the distillation process is complete, the rum is stored in wooden barrels for several years. Last but not least, the liquid is bottled and enjoyed by both cocktail and rum lovers alike. Because the lodge sits on a hill, a funicular railway system was built, allowing guests to conveniently ride up or down. The longer of the two tracks leads to a river at the bottom of the hill. While walking up or down the adjacent stairs involves a lot of huffing and puffing, the railway enabled us to take in the rainforest at a snail's pace. Once at the bottom, we looked upon the Rio Grande, which is flanked by rainforest on both sides. Out of the corner of our eyes, we noticed some movement, only to discover several crabs in the mud. One way to intimately explore this river habitat is with a kayak. Steadily paddling upstream allowed me to enjoy the little disturbed wilderness to the fullest. Tropical rainforests cover around 7% of our planet, but they are home to the majority of species. To this day, more than half of Belize remains covered by dense forests, which the government has pledged to preserve. So far, 40% of the land is protected as part of nature reserves. At the same time, illegal logging and poaching still pose a big threat to many species. Hopefully, one way to solve this conundrum is by providing an economic alternative, for example, in the form of a growing ecotourism industry. Early the next morning, we went out to discover as many birds as possible. More than 200 bird species occur in this area, making for rich pickings when venturing out early. Many of the birds were busy with their morning toilet, such as this Montezuma or a pendula. Others gave each other a helping beak, for example these groove-billed anis. Especially striking because of their colorful plumage were both the black-headed trogon as well as its cousin, the slaty-tailed trogon. Somewhat less conspicuous was this pair of brown jays. Often heard before seen, the pale-billed woodpecker sports a striking red head. This bird uses its beak to excavate decaying wood or scaling bark, on the hunt for larvae, beetles and termites. Almost all visitors, of course, hope to see one of the most flamboyant birds of the jungle, the Keel-billed Toucan. This large bird is very social and often congregates in small flocks. Similar to the Scarlet Macaw, Keel-billed toucans are not blessed with a melodious singing voice. Their call rather sounds like the croaking of frogs and is often mistaken as such.
So these cacao trees are scientifically known as Theobroma cacao, which simply means food of the gods. These trees, they grow 20 degrees north on south pole of the equator, which is known to be as the cacao belt. All right? They fairly grow in uniform temperature, rich nitrogen soil, protection from wind, abundant rain, and in short, they thrive in the rainforest. It has been dated back that the Mayans are the first cultivators of these crops here. The Mayans are using these trees in terms of currency. All right, so the beans itself, so they specifically use it for trading whatever they need, spice, chili peppers, maize, whatever. Okay, and then they're enjoying it as a drink. Okay, so back in the days, it's not a chocolate bar, it is always a drink. It's a pre-grinded chocolate mixed with water. So it is usually being served for the royal families, which is the king and the queen. Okay, for special occasions. For one flower to produce an edible pod, it will take 7 months. By that time, it is already, good to harvest. So they're gonna have a change in color when it comes to harvesting. For the green ones specifically, they're gonna have that change in color from green to yellow. And when it turns yellow, then we go ahead and harvest them.
Once the pods are harvested, they are manually cleared and the beans are left outside to ferment and dry. To actually make tasty chocolate, however, the beans need to be roasted. As soon as the bean is roasted, it becomes quite brittle and its hull easily peels off.
The grinding stone is called matate, right? It's a matate, and it's what the Mayans were using to grind their chocolate. This grinding stone and these small Premier Wonder grinders is very similar. So if you look inside, you will notice that inside the machine, the wheels, they're stone, the bottom cylinder stone. So stone and stone turning, similar to this one here, but with a motor and allowing whatever ingredients you add in there to become smoother and smoother. So this morning, we're gonna make 70% dark chocolate. After 16 hours of grinding your chocolate, this is how it should look, right? So smooth, so creamy, 16 hours of grinding, right? And then we're gonna temper our chocolate because we're gonna make some bars. And tempering is basically heat, cool, and rewarm. We already did the first step, so it's already melted, and now we're gonna cool it on the countertop, and then we're gonna take it back in there and rewarm, and then we're gonna mold our chocolate, right? You ready?
Whoa, it's so satisfying.
So satisfying.
Satisfying, right? You notice how shiny this chocolate looks?
Without question, our favorite part of this excursion into the world of cocoa was when we got to pour our own chocolate. And then, after 2 failed attempts, the weather finally allowed us to go snorkeling. Taking a small boat, left Punta Gorda behind and headed out to the southern end of the Belize Barrier Reef. After roughly 40 minutes, we arrived at a snorkel site in the Port Honduras Marine Reserve. Not wasting any time, we hopped into the water. The first thing we noticed was that all the rain and wind of the previous week had stirred up plenty of sediments. Even though the water looked quite clear from above, underneath the surface it was rather murky. Despite that, we quickly discovered life in this aquatic garden. In total, 500 species of fish, more than 100 species of coral, and countless invertebrates have been identified here so far. Saying that, only about 1/10 of the Belize Barrier Reef has been researched, which means that many more species are waiting to be discovered. What was noticeable was how many different shapes the corals took on. In these life forms, a distinction is made between hard corals and soft corals. Whereas hard corals are immobile, soft corals sway back and forth with the current. Looking very much like underwater plants, plenty of these structures are in fact part of the octocoral family. These come in a plethora of shapes, from soft fluffy forms to delicate fans. Different fish are well adapted to both types of coral, as was evident by the many species swimming around. Less agile than the fish was this red cushion sea star, which sluggishly moved across the ocean floor. As an omnivore, this slow-motion predator scours the seabed for algae, sponges, and small invertebrates. Somewhat higher up on the food chain is this nocturnal nurse shark. All in all, we spent more than 2.5 hours in the water, getting a small glimpse of this vast reef system. With the south of Belize in our rearview mirror, we headed north until taking the turnoff to the Hummingbird Highway. This road provides one of two options to explore the central interior of the country. It also leads directly to St. Herman's Blue Hole National Park. This park gets its name from a turquoise-colored sinkhole that should not be confused with the offshore Blue Hole. Surrounded by lush jungle vegetation and limestone rock walls, the inland Blue Hole is a serene place for quiet contemplation. The water of the pool is part of an underground cave system that seemingly emerges out of nowhere. In fact, the entire area is made up of permeable karst rock, allowing water to pass through it before disappearing in a cave again. Another popular place to visit in the park is the St. Herman's Cave. A short walking trail without artificial lighting leads into the dark, allowing visitors to glance at the rock formations.
As a self-guided visitor, this is as far as I can go, because up to this point there was firm ground, but from here onwards it is just water, and you can only explore further with a certified guide. But what is really fascinating about this cave is both the quiet as well as the fact that this entire area is riddled with underground passageways, caverns and caves, and many of them can be explored on exciting tours.
One of the most demanding caves of the park, and of all of Belize for that matter, is the Crystal Cave. This underground realm can only be explored with a certified guide, and for good reason, as would soon be evident. Less than 5 minutes in the cave, and we were already squeezing ourselves through narrow passageways. Soon after, the cave widened, but several climbing sections were no less challenging.
I'm working on it. I'm trying to find a handhold, y'all.
I got you here.
Oh, lordy.
Grab the pocket or grab the edge.
Can you grab my hand? Nope.
Try to do the flap, yes.
Okay.
At this point, it's more like we're going to be mostly on our feet, but it's also very slippery. Like I said, you can see the humidity.
Yeah,
So,
you can see it in the air.
Yeah, so it keeps it very moist and slippery.
Frankly, it is hard to visually do the effort justice that was required to scramble through the darkness. But imagine a very hot cave with zero airflow and extremely high humidity that is covered in slippery rocks with muddy surfaces. Even more than physical fitness, however, strong willpower is needed to safely traverse this cave system. What definitely helps is to be surrounded by a group of adventure-loving people who are always ready to laugh.
Just catch me.
I was just saying that I'll be able to catch you if you...
Where is the good handhold? Oh, I will be there. Alright, we're doing it. Should I leave my backpack here?
Yes, oh yeah, let's do the backpacks, the leaving behind.
Oh, this is actually ah!
That's why you got a helmet there. Oh, you're in camera.
Lovely, thank you.
All the exertion eventually paid off when we arrived in Wonderland, a part of the cave that features magnificent rock formations.
To me, the most fascinating part is what all that you're seeing right here wouldn't be here if it weren't for water. Limestone formed under the ocean. Corals, you know, they only form in the ocean, right? And then fossilized coral reefs and other skeletal remains from the ocean formed limestone. Got compacted and, you know, compressed by chemical processes and pressure. Right? 65% of the country is limestone, and that's why we have hundreds, if not thousands, of caves. So as we're going through, you will be seeing different colors and, you know, different the texture of the formations and the shapes and all that. It's all based on the different minerals that the water gets to introduce to the formation and the behavior of the water, the manner in which water moves, whether it's showers, sprinkles, flows over the slope like that, creating flow zones. These formations all get their unique shapes. And again, the most fascinating part is it all comes from water. What shapes a cave? What makes a cave? Water, right? Rainwater. What makes the formations? Rainwater. What we're looking at right there is one of the offerings that were brought, you know, to the cave by the ancient Mayan people between the age of 800 to 1080. The reason why they were sacrificing people in the cave, and it was mainly caves alone that they sacrificed people. It was when they started to get that long drought. And what caused the long drought in the Mayan history is overpopulating the cities, because they had to use more and more of the resources around it to the point where it was all bare land. They cleared it, set it on fire for farming and purposes, you know, to sustain the population. So at one point things started to go, you know, downhill. for them. So that is when they started to come in the caves to make their offerings, and it was mainly to petition for rain. Chak, the rain god, it would have been the most important god at the time, because without the rain they couldn't grow their food. And the sacrifices was just the ultimate offering that they did. In fact, they came to the caves to make many more offerings, not just the sacrifices. And that's what you will be seeing in the ceremonial chamber, which is where they did bloodletting, food offering. They brought ornaments like nice painted ceramic, pots and stuff like that. Jewelry, bracelets, necklaces. Sacrifices, like I said, was the ultimate thing that they did. Human sacrifices. And you can probably think of them starting with animals, then at one point they offered people. The intriguing part of it is who got sacrificed, and for them it was the elite, the royal people, the royal children. Because if you look at it this way, their role in society was to keep the gods happy and to bridge the communication with the gods and the people, right? And a true sacrifice would only be if the person volunteered, and if it was the best of the best.
From this deepest point of our expedition, we still needed to master the long way back. This involved several sections of climbing, as well as narrow passageways. It is incredible to contemplate how the ancient Maya explored this cave with nothing but blazing torches.
Wiggle. Just a little bit.
I actually can't do that. Don't tempt me with a good time.
After 4.5 hours in the Mayan underworld, we felt a breeze of fresh air upon seeing the cave's opening. Our further journey brought us to the very west of the country, where we checked into Sweet Song's Jungle Lodge. This hotel sits directly above the Macaw River, a placid stream meandering through the jungle. In the afternoon, the sun illuminated the limestone cliff on the opposite shore, making for quite a spectacular view. Lounging on the beach chairs for hours, we simply took in the scenery. Another way to experience the river is by going tubing. For that, I picked up an inflatable tube ring and walked to the river access point. Once in the water, I let the gentle current take me downstream. The next morning, we awoke to a forest concert par excellence. More than 300 bird species have been recorded around the lodge. Of these, we heard many more than we saw or captured on camera. Especially the smaller ones often prove to be too skittish. Fairly easy to observe were the melodious blackbirds that congregated in large groups. Equally common is the brown jay, a medium-sized bird with a loud, persistent singing. Not quite as boisterous as the russet-napped woodrail. Even more shy was this gartered trogon, which was hiding its beautiful yellow belly. High up on a branch, we also spotted a masked Taitira with its characteristic red eye-ring. The red-throated ant tanager, on the other hand, is almost entirely red and therefore much more conspicuous. The same applies to its close relative, the summer tanager. This bird is one of the many migratory species that fly south to the tropics during winter. The Lesson's motmot, on the other hand, is a year-round resident. With its luminescent crown of cyan-colored plumage, this bird is a real eye-catcher. The plain chachalaca, as its name suggests, does not sport such an exuberant plumage. These chicken-sized birds regularly gather in groups, which makes it easy to spot them. Like many others, they have a penchant for feeding on fruits. Our favorite by far was the colored Aracari. These brightly marked birds are one of the 3 toucan species in Belize. Their large bill, in combination with the red, yellow and black plumage, makes them easy to recognize. Collared Aracaris are known to be very social, regularly traveling in groups of up to 15 birds. When they are not on the move, they can often be seen grooming their feathers. Their favorite source of food is undeniably fruits. This also explains their large presence at the lodge, as they have learned to appreciate a free breakfast. Just a short drive north of Sweet Songs lies the archaeological reserve of Junantunich. To get there, we embarked on another hand-cranked ferry that brought us across the Mopan River. Of all the ancient Maya cities in Belize, Junantunich is easily among the most impressive. The biggest structure of the site is known as El Castillo. This stepped pyramid is of massive proportions, easily breaking through the forest canopy. From its top, a staggering view of the smaller temples and former plaza opens up. For our last days in Belize, we headed to the remote Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve, where we checked into Blancaneaux Lodge. Deeply embedded in the forest of the reserve, the lodge sits directly above Privation Creek. moving into a riverfront cabana provided us with a tree-framed view of the stream. Strolling around the resort, we noticed that the vegetation was significantly different compared to everything else we had seen so far. As the name of the reserve suggests, the majority of trees found here are pine trees, specifically Caribbean pine. Other than the dense jungle of the lowland, this type of forest is much more open. The next morning, we decided to have breakfast on our cabana's terrace. There is hardly a more joyous holiday feeling than listening to the gentle lull of a river while enjoying fresh fruits and banana pancakes. Taking in the natural serenity around us without a care in the world, we discovered a pair of black-headed saltators equally enjoying a meal. A little further down, a female brown basilisk was blending perfectly into the tree. If motionless, this lizard is extremely well camouflaged. To explore some more of the surroundings, I decided to follow a riverside hiking trail. Throughout the millennia, the well-fed stream has cut its way through a rock landscape, creating many dazzling pools. Even more impressive, however, are the big rock falls. Here, the water tumbles 45 meters into the depth. Because of the sudden drop, innumerable water droplets fly through the air, creating a refreshing mist. Those seeking a more intense cooldown can also jump into the large pool at the bottom of the falls. Later that day, we went out on a nighttime expedition. Our hopes were to discover some nocturnal animals. Together with 2 guides, we kept our eyes and ears open for any type of movement or noise. Strikingly, the forest is anything but quiet at night. All of the bigger animals, such as the tapir, armadillo or jaguar, eluded us, but we did stumble upon some smaller ones. The most exciting of these were a mottled owl perched on a tree branch, as well as a kinkajou in the canopy. From Blancaneaux, only a few roads lead deeper into the wilderness of western Belize. On one of these tracks, we eventually found ourselves flanked by thick vegetation. The road led us directly to Caracol, one of the most important political centers of the Maya during the Classic period.
It is incredible to contemplate how this was once the site of a flourishing civilization with roughly 150,000 inhabitants, whereas today we are surrounded by jungle on all sides. But what is even more impressive is that several of these ancient Maya cities can be found in the nearby jungle, and every single one of them succumbed to an ecological disaster of their own making.
To put these numbers into perspective, understand that modern-day Belize City, the largest settlement in the country, has only 63,000 inhabitants. But it is exactly this overpopulation, that eventually caused the downfall of the flourishing Maya civilization. Within only a few centuries, almost every single one of the great lowland cities was abandoned, and a majority of the population moved north to the Yucatan Peninsula. A large number of theories have been put forward to explain this monumental change, ranging from foreign invasions to collapsed trade routes and epidemic diseases. The most widely accepted theory centers on a long period of drought. Many scientists believe that the Maya played a crucial role in their own downfall by practicing excessive slash-and-burn agriculture. In a nutshell, they cleared most of the historic jungle to plant maize, causing deforestation, siltation, and a loss of biodiversity. This in turn changed the microclimate, resulting in higher temperatures and less rain, eventually leading to a systemic ecological collapse of the entire lowland civilization. In the 1,000 years since the Maya's demise, Mother Nature has slowly claimed back her realm, leaving archaeologists still searching for the truth. Whereas the road to Caracol was in a fairly decent state, many of the smaller trails in the area are much rougher. One of these tracks led us towards Rio Frio Cave. Surrounded by dense jungle, this wide open tunnel is roughly 400 meters long. Inside the cave, countless rock formations provide an interesting glimpse into the geological history of the area. The surrounding forest is the habitat of many different animals. Perceptive visitors may spot a Central American agouti on the search for tasty fruits and nuts. These rodents are rather shy and will often hide when humans approach. Towards the afternoon, the shadows started to lengthen as we found ourselves on another gravel road. Leading into the eastern part of Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve, the trail became increasingly bumpy. At one point, the impact of the previous week's rainfall was evident when large parts of the track were riddled with deep ruts. At the end of the path, we marveled at the upper part of the 1,000-foot fall. Interestingly, the waterfall is even higher than its name suggests. Dropping almost 500 meters towards the forest floor, this is, in all likelihood, the highest waterfall in Central America. On our last evening, we were surprised with a very special dinner at Blancaneaux. Our private table was set up on a wooden platform, creating a truly romantic ambience. Serenaded by the sound of the river, we enjoyed both the food and the company of each other. Meanwhile, above us, the clear sky provided an incredible view of the starry firmament. After 3.5 weeks, having driven more than 2,000 kilometers, our road trip through Belize came to an end. Combining adventure with relaxation and history with biodiversity, Belize has won our hearts. As the world around us is in ever-increasing turmoil, we sincerely hope that Belize preserves its natural treasures. Hearing the howl of a monkey, admiring the colors of a scarlet macaw, or experiencing the vibrancy of the underwater world is a true privilege. We humans are just one piece in a large puzzle, and Belize has vividly opened our eyes to that.